The desert wind comes first. Hot, rough, blinding. In 1941, outside Tobruk, an Italian infantry squad presses itself into the sand as British artillery moves closer. Rifle cracks cut through the air. Somewhere across the ridgeline, a Bren gun rattles in steady, confident bursts. The Italian corporal shouts for the machine gun. The assistant gunner flips open the dust cover of their squad's most important weapon. Sand already sticks to the oiled bullets inside its strange side-mounted magazine. The gunner pulls the trigger. 1 shot. 2. A pause. Then silence. He works the charging handle again, heart racing. The weapon that was meant to hold the squad together has locked itself and refuses to fire. This was the problem of the Breda 30. On paper, it was modern, carefully built, mechanically advanced. It showed Italy's goal to stand among the big industrial powers of Europe. Yet on the battlefield, especially in the deserts of North Africa, it showed a deadly clash between careful design and chaotic reality. The story of the Breda 30 is not just about a flawed machine gun. It is about what happens when pride in engineering meets the harsh rules of war. To understand why this weapon existed, we have to look at Italy in the 1930s. Under Benito Mussolini, the government pushed hard for modernization and military respect. Factories grew. Industrial output was praised. Machines became part of propaganda. Italy wanted weapons that looked advanced, that symbolized progress and discipline. One of the companies growing at this time was Società Italiana Ernesto Breda, a firm that had started with locomotives and heavy machines before moving into arms during the First World War. Breda knew precision work. It understood complex systems. When asked to design a new light machine gun in 1930, it did not go for simplicity, but for technical ambition. The Italian army imagined a squad built around automatic fire. The machine gun was not just support, it was the center. Riflemen were meant to protect it, carry bullets for it, and move around it. This choice made the Breda 30 very important. It had to work reliably, because if it failed, the squad's firepower collapsed with it. Using the standard 6.5 by 52mm Carcano cartridge, the Breda seemed practical. It weighed over 10 kilograms, heavy for a light machine gun but manageable. It fed from a fixed 20-round magazine mounted on the side, which opened on a hinge to accept stripper clips. This magazine system was one of its key features, and also one of its most argued about. Unlike the British Bren light machine gun, which used detachable box magazines that could be swapped quickly, the Breda's magazine stayed attached. The gunner opened it like a small metal door, pressed fresh rounds in from clips and closed it again. Inside, a set of levers and springs guided the bullets into place. It was detailed, almost graceful in its design, but every extra moving part was another place it could break. Mechanically, the Breda 30 worked using a short recoil system with a rotating bolt. It fired from a closed bolt, which should have made first shots more accurate. It also had a cartridge oiling system. Before each round entered the chamber, a small part put oil on the bullet to make it easier to fire. In controlled conditions, this could reduce some problems. In the deserts of Libya, it became a problem. Oil attracted sand. Sand turned into a rough paste. The system meant to improve reliability ended up hurting it. Heat made it worse. Because the Breda fired from a closed bolt, the chamber stayed sealed between shots, trapping heat. Italian manuals recommended changing the barrel after about 200 rounds of continuous fire. 200 rounds was just 10 magazines. In contrast, German crews with the MG42 could fire huge amounts of bullets quickly, swapping barrels to keep up the pace. The difference on the battlefield was clear. Where the MG42 dominated through volume and fear, the Breda needed care and control. Yet the Breda was not totally bad. In cooler areas and less sandy environments, it could work fine. Its theoretical rate was 400 to 500 rounds per minute, though practical fire stayed closer to 120 to 150. Crews learned not to push it too hard. They fired in short bursts. They kept it clean. Assistant gunners became as much mechanics as soldiers. In effect, the Italian squad changed its habits to match the personality of its machine gun. There is something very human in that adaptation. Imagine a young recruit handed this weapon after little training. He must remember to open the dust cover before firing. He must make sure bullets are correctly placed in the hinge magazine. He must manage oiling, heat, and clear jams under fire. Meanwhile, an enemy gunner with a Bren swaps magazines and keeps shooting with little interruption. An American soldier with the M1918 Browning automatic rifle does not worry about oiling each bullet before combat. The Italian gunner, however, carries the load of complexity. Nearly 30,000 Breda 30s were made between 1930 and 1943. They served in North Africa, the Balkans, Greece, and East Africa. They were not removed or redesigned during the war. Italy did not have the industrial power to replace them quickly. So the Breda stayed, becoming the backbone of Italian infantry out of need rather than full respect. In many ways, the Breda 30 showed its era. It reflected a belief that mechanical detail meant battlefield strength. It showed confidence in engineering solutions. But war is not a lab. It is mud, heat, fear, and unpredictability. A machine can be well built and still struggle in that world. The Breda 30 was not made to dominate through brute force. It was made to work within tight rules and careful steps. And on the battlefield of the Second World War, those rules were constantly broken. This clash between ambition and reality, precision and chaos, would define the Breda service life. And as the war grew harder, the true test of the weapon would not be found in factory numbers, but in the split seconds between a trigger pull and a jam under fire. The first taste of combat for the Breda 30 came not on the icy steppes of the Eastern Front, but under the blistering sun of East Africa. October 1935, the Second Italo-Ethiopian War. Italian columns moved over bare hills, rifles slung, packs heavy with supplies, and the Breda 30 carried at the heart of each squad. In theory, it was supposed to be a force multiplier, a source of reliable firepower that could hold down enemy positions and allow infantry to move. In practice, the landscape became a testing ground for every flaw the weapon carried within its built frame. Italian soldiers said that sand and dust were the silent killers. Each time the hinged magazine opened to take a new stripper clip, the tiniest grains would enter the feed system. Combined with the weapon's oiler, this created a gritty paste that turned a mechanical wonder into a stubborn, unhelpful metal trap. One corporal said he had to stop mid-advance, open the magazine with his bare hands, and scrape sand from inside before he could keep firing. Meanwhile, enemy troops, often armed with lighter, more reliable rifles or machine guns, kept up constant pressure. The Breda was supposed to anchor the squad. Instead, it demanded constant care, slowing advances and creating weakness. The problems of North Africa made these issues worse. In the deserts around Tobruk and El Alamein, winds could whip sand into blinding clouds. The Italians, already stretched thin in supplies, could not spare time to clean every weapon after each firefight. The fixed, side-mounted magazine became a problem not just mechanically but tactically. Its size made the weapon awkward on the move, likely to snag on rocks or the hull of vehicles. When a magazine was damaged, a bent hinge, a crushed feed lip, the weapon was basically useless until the part could be fixed. Italian squads learned to improvise, often carrying the Breda as carefully as a human passenger. Compare this to the weapons it was meant to compete with. The British Bren, though heavier and slower to make, had detachable magazines and a proven record for reliability. The American Bear allowed semi-automatic bursts with little trouble, and the German MG-34 and MG-42 brought huge amounts of firepower and fear. The Breda, in contrast, needed careful handling, near-ritual loading steps, and constant attention to avoid big jams. Its theoretical fire rate of 500 rounds per minute rarely turned into real firepower. In battle, a squad could realistically fire only 120 rounds per minute, barely more than what a rifle team could manage. Yet despite these clear problems, Italian soldiers grew attached to their Breda 30s. There was a strange respect for the weapon's precise mechanics. Its parts were finely made, almost beautiful, in the way only Italian craft could achieve. Some crews praised the weapon for its accuracy in short bursts, its ability to fire from a steady bipod, and its theoretical lethality when properly kept. For those who knew its quirks and could predict its failures, the Breda could still be a deadly ally. But such mastery was rare among recruits, and even the best gunners could not beat environmental chaos. The human cost of this complexity showed in every campaign. In Greece, Italian units moving into mountainous areas faced well-prepared defensive positions. The Breda 30 was meant to provide suppressive fire, yet frequent jams meant soldiers had to expose themselves to enemy fire while clearing the weapon. Casualties rose. Stories appeared of gunners leaving the Breda mid-battle, retreating with rifles in hand while others tried to bring the stubborn machine back to life. It was a weapon made for reliability that demanded care like a living partner. Part of the problem lay in its design idea. Italian engineers focused on mechanical cleverness over battlefield practicality. The oiler, a hallmark of Breda craft, oiled each round before chambering. In theory, this prevented misfires and made extraction easier. In reality, the oil-covered cartridges became magnets for dust and sand. Overheating made it worse. Firing from a closed bolt trapped heat in the chamber, increasing the risk of cook-offs, rounds firing on their own when the chamber got too hot. A gunner had to handle temperature, loading steps, and jam clearing all under enemy fire. Training manuals stressed the role of the assistant gunner. Every squad needed a dedicated loader, skilled at stripping clips, watching lubrication, and maintaining the barrel. Yet in the chaos of war, these steps were often impossible to follow strictly. In combat, the Breda's elegant mechanics became an unpredictable obstacle. One North African veteran recalled a firefight where 3 Breda 30s jammed at the same time, leaving Italian troops pinned down while the British moved forward. The gunner worked hard, stripping clips, clearing rounds, yet the weapon's complexity beat even him. Even when working, the Breda could not match its rivals in raw firepower. A single MG-42 could fire enough bullets to cover a whole squad's advance. The BAR could provide steady suppressive fire in semi-automatic bursts. The Breda 30, even in the best conditions, struggled to match 2 or 3 soldiers' worth of firepower. Its magazine size and reloading method put limits that no skill could fully overcome. In a modern example, it was like trying to win a race with a high-performance car that needed manual assembly before every lap. Combat conditions forced improvisation. Italian crews developed workarounds, extra care with magazines, constant checking for sand, disciplined bursts to avoid overheating, but these were temporary fixes. The Breda demanded more than it gave, creating tension in units. Commanders had to plan for frequent weapon failures when organizing attacks. Suppressive fire became a gamble. Italian infantry adapted to fit the weapon, rather than the weapon adapting to the battlefield. Yet the story of the Breda 30 is not only one of failure. It served through many campaigns, from Ethiopia to Greece, and finally across North African deserts. It stayed standard issue until 1945, a sign not of superiority, but of Italy's limited industrial power. The country could not make enough alternative designs, nor quickly produce replacements. Soldiers made do, learning to work with a weapon that tested their patience as much as their courage. The Breda became part of the Italian soldier's identity, a stubborn, sometimes tricky partner in the heat of war. Looking at its legacy, one sees both caution and respect. The Breda 30 affected how designers thought about LMG comfort and reliability. Its quirks showed the results of over-engineering in combat, teaching a lesson about balancing mechanical cleverness with practical use. Modern light machine guns with detachable magazines, heat-resistant barrels and simple feed systems carry the invisible marks of the mistakes and goals of weapons like the Breda. Its reputation among enemies was also telling. German troops, who sometimes captured Breda 30s in the Balkans or North Africa, could use them but were unimpressed compared to their MG series. Allied soldiers often viewed the weapon with surprise, seeing the precise engineering but amazed at how quickly it could fail in normal conditions. The difference between the Breda and contemporary designs shows a bigger lesson about World War II small arms. In war, reliability often matters more than technical elegance. The human side, the sweat, the fear, the improvisation remains central to its story. For every jam, every cook-off, every clogged magazine, there was a soldier moving forward, improvising with courage, and sometimes barely surviving. These experiences were as important as any tactical manual or engineering blueprint, leaving a lasting mark on the men who carried the weapon across deserts, mountains, and frozen fields. By the time World War II ended, the Breda 30 had seen almost every battlefield used by the Italian army. From the dry deserts of North Africa to the rough mountains of Greece, from the plains of Ethiopia to the scattered islands of the Mediterranean, the weapon had earned a reputation few could forget. Its story is not one of victory, but of survival, and in its flaws, the Breda 30 offers one of the clearest lessons in military engineering. Being brilliant on paper does not always mean being effective in battle. Italian soldiers carried the Breda out of need, not choice. There were simply no alternatives in enough numbers. Submachine guns like the Beretta Model 38 existed, and they were highly prized, light, fast, reliable. But production could never meet demand. Heavy machine guns like the Breda 8mm gave more firepower, but needed a crew and mobility that a frontline squad could not spare. In this context, the Breda 30 was both a blessing and a curse. A standard-issue LMG that could, in theory, support a squad, but in practice needed near constant care. Soldiers learned the weapon's moods closely, how heat, sand and poor oiling could turn its complex engineering against them. The human side is central to understanding the Breda's legacy. Veterans describe moments where the gun, despite its flaws, saved lives. A correctly loaded Breda, its oiler working properly, could deliver precise controlled bursts that held enemy troops back long enough for a squad to move. In these brief moments, the gun's engineering, its tight parts, its carefully made feed system, was nothing short of brilliant. Yet these moments were mixed with frustration. A jam in the middle of an ambush, rounds firing on their own, a bent magazine hinge stopping fire. These contradictions created a love-hate relationship between the Italian soldier and his LMG, a tension that shaped every fight. The Breda 30's design also left a clear mark on military thinking. Its side-mounted fixed magazine, while meant to make it stronger, showed the risks of overcomplication. Modern designers learned from this. Simplicity and modularity often matter more than perfect design. Detachable magazines, simpler feed paths, and self-contained barrels became standard in later LMG designs. Likewise, the oiler system, though clever, showed that too much intervention could create new problems instead of solving old ones. Modern automatic weapons rely on careful metalwork, chamber design, and precise tolerances rather than adding oil to fix mechanical quirks. Despite its flaws, the Breda 30 played an important role in Italian tactics. It shaped how squads fought, for better or worse. Soldiers had to plan for reload times, barrel overheating, and frequent jams, meaning movements were slower, more careful, and heavily planned. Officers learned to work around the weapon's problems, adding other fire support or changing formations to reduce risk. In many ways, the Breda 30 forced the Italian army to innovate in tactics, even as the gun itself lagged behind its rivals technologically. Captured Breda 30 seconds tell another story. German troops used them when they could, but the weapon was never highly valued outside Italian hands. Allied soldiers, on the other hand, admired its intricate engineering, while also noticing its weakness in desert conditions. Today, surviving examples in museums and private collections are studied less for battlefield success and more as lessons in industrial ambition meeting the chaos of war. It shows human skill, yes, but also the dangers of overengineering. The attempts to upgrade the Breda in 1938, introducing the more powerful 7.35mm cartridge, show the continued effort to improve a flawed design. The Modello 38 kept almost all the original parts, including the hinged magazine and oiler system, while trying to fix the firepower problem. Yet production stayed low, and the improvements were not enough to fix the weapon's basic problems. By the war's end, the Breda 30 was officially retired, replaced by more practical and reliable LMGs. Its story, however, stayed in the memory of soldiers who had struggled with it, both loved and cursed it, and made it part of their survival in battle. From a historical view, the Breda 30 is interesting not because it dominated, but because it survived despite its weaknesses. It shows the tension between industrial ambition and the real conditions of combat. Its quirks show the complexity of Italian wartime industry, skilled engineering limited by scarce resources, political pressure, and urgent needs of a nation at war. In this way, the Breda 30 is more than a weapon. It is a lens into the Italian war effort, showing how strategy, supplies, and human skill interact with technology under the stress of conflict. In modern terms, the lessons of the Breda 30 still matter. Militaries study not only successful designs, but also failures. The Breda shows that reliability, ease of use, and adaptability can matter more than mechanical cleverness. Modern light machine guns, like the FN Minimi, HKM G4, or the M249 SAW, focus on simplicity, high-capacity magazines, modular parts, and easy field maintenance. Each of these design ideas carries lessons first shown by the Breda 30. Yet, there is a strange beauty in the Breda. Its parts are finely made, almost artful in their precision. Collectors admire the engineering and skill that went into every hinge, bolt, and rotating nut. Even today, taking apart a Breda 30 shows the ambition of its makers, the intricate dance of springs, levers, and locking collars, a weapon both elegant and frustrating, precise and unreliable. Ultimately, the Breda 30 remains a paradox in military history. A light machine gun that failed to dominate yet survived across a decade of war. A tool both admired for its craftsmanship and cursed for its battlefield problems. It shaped tactics, defined soldier experiences, and influenced future designs, even as it frustrated and risked the lives of those who carried it. Its story reminds us that the measure of a war machine is not only in its numbers or firepower, but in how it works with human hands, human courage, and the chaos of battle. For the soldiers of Italy, the Breda 30 was more than steel and springs. It was a test of patience, a trial by fire, and sometimes the thin line between life and death. It forced cleverness, courage, and adaptation. And though history remembers it mostly for its failings, for those who carried it, it remains a symbol of the harsh realities of war, the unglamorous truth that even the most carefully built tools are useless without human skill to guide them. So when we look back at the light machine guns of World War II, remember the Breda 30. Remember the sand in the desert, the jammed rounds, the overheated barrels, the frantic loading of clips under fire. Remember the skill, the frustration, and the courage it demanded. Because sometimes the story of a weapon is not in victories, but in the endurance of the soldiers who used it, and in the lessons it left for generations to come.